Alright, so I screwed up this video once already. So, there's no way. There's no way. No way. No way. No way I screwed this up twice. Hopefully. I don't know. What's up guys, Joey Guy here with JG Multimedia, and today we're going to be talking about adjusting the manual settings on any camera. Now I know we're all guilty of using the automatic mode on our camera when we first start off, but by using and switching over to manual mode, you're actually able to take full control of the camera and control both the light as well as the color settings in your camera. You're going to be able to raise your photography skills from like down here to the moon. So high, just by simply switching over to manual settings and fully understanding, each of the different settings and what they do. So today we're going to be talking about 4 specific elements. The first one is ISO. The second one is shutter speed. The third one is aperture. And finally, the fourth one is more of a lightness setting. It's white balance. So the first one we're going to be talking about, guys, is ISO. Now, simply put, ISO is just a numerical value on your camera that adjusts the camera's light sensor to the light. So the higher the ISO, the more sensitive your camera's light sensor is going to be to light, and the lower the ISO, the lower sensitivity your camera light sensor is going to have to light. So obviously, the less sensitive your sensor is to light, the less light it's going to let in. The higher the sensitivity, the more light, and the brighter your photos are going to be. However, I usually keep my ISO around 100 to 200 because the higher your ISO, yeah, it's going to be brighter, but it's also going to bring in more noise. Usually you want to adjust the other settings like shutter speed and aperture before you really mess around with the ISO. And that's just because, like I said, the higher your ISO, you're going to get more noise and distortion. So keep ISO around 100 to 200 until you actually adjust the other settings and fix the brightness in your photos, and then mess around with the ISO and raise it if you need to let in more light. So the second one we're going to be talking about is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is just how long your camera's shutters open for. So this means that the longer your shutter's open, the more light it's going to let in. However, you're also going to get more motion blur if the shutter's a little bit too long. I mean, my camera can go up to 30 seconds for its shutter speed. So in those 30 seconds, you're going to be letting in all the light for that 30 seconds, and you're going to get all the motion that you see in that image. However, the faster the shutter speed, the less light you're going to let into your light sensor, because the shutter is going to open and close incredibly fast. If you get it 1/800th of a second, you're going to let in less motion blur. However, you're also going to let in less light. Higher shutter speed's great for, shooting pictures of cars driving by, or sports photography, or birds or animals. Anything that requires movement, you're going to want a higher shutter speed, but you're going to have less brightness. So you're going to have to rely on adjusting, the aperture and the ISO to help gain more brightness and kind of compensate for that high shutter speed. So slower shutter speed has its advantages, and a faster shutter speed has its advantages. For a slower shutter speed, you're probably going to have to use a tripod, because no matter how still your hands are, you're going to get shakiness and kind of distortion around the edges. So you're going to want to use a tripod. However, with a longer shutter speed, you're able to do cool things like light painting. If you've ever taken a flashlight and just let the camera shutter go, you try to draw pictures. You're also able to get cool kind of milky water if you take a long exposure, waves crashing against the beach or whatever, a river going down. Get that milky water. Or you can even get light trails from cars. However, for most shots, you're going to be using a higher shutter speed, because long exposure stuff is cool for nighttime photography and stuff. But when it comes down to, product shots or sports photography, usually it's going to be faster shutter speeds, because people don't want motion blur in there, unless it's more of an artistic kind of feel or vision. Now, the next one we're going to be talking about is aperture. Now, aperture is also known as the f-stop or the f-ratio, and this is pretty much just the size of the hole that's at the center of your camera's shutter or iris. So the lower the f-ratio or the f-stop, the larger the aperture. That means that more light's going to reach your light sensor, because the hole in the iris is going to be bigger, letting in more light. However, with a larger aperture, you're actually going to have a more shallow focal point. So you can have, for you guys, this is the foreground, and then the background, and in between there, you're going to have a very shallow focal point where you're actually going to have, focus, and it's not going to be blurred. So your foreground will be blurred, your background will be blurred, but you'll get kind of that nice crisp image in the middle. So this is great for, bokeh blurs with lights or a blurry background. So in contrast, the higher the f-stop or the f-ratio, the smaller the aperture is going to be, that little hole in the iris. And so with a higher f-stop or f-ratio, the hole is going to be smaller, and you're going to be letting in less light. So less light's going to be hitting that light sensor, and so obviously your images are going to be less bright. However, you're actually going to be able to, if you have the foreground, the background, everything in between that is actually going to be in focus and kind of have a nice crisp look and feel to it instead of getting that blur. So your focal point will have more depth. However, with aperture, parameters actually change with different focal lengths, even when both lenses are set to the same f-stop. So yeah, just a quick demonstration. As you can see here, you have a lower f-stop or f ratio. So the aperture is wider. You're going to have that big open hole you see in the iris. And now I'm going to raise the f-stop, f ratio. Now the aperture is smaller, and so you have that little hole in the iris. That's going to let in less light compared to this one that's letting in more light. Cool, huh? And so the last setting that you should know when you're messing around with your manual settings and trying to get the right photo is white balance. Now, white balance is just the removal of unrealistic colors in an image. So that means that an object that is white in person will actually be portrayed as white in the image. And going along with white balance, color temperature can also help you achieve the white balance that you're looking for. Now obviously, the warmer the color temperature, the more oranges, reds, yellows you're going to get, and the cooler the temperature, the more blues, greens, purples you're going to get in an image. And most cameras have an auto white balance, however this isn't always accurate. If you go outside and you keep changing locations, you're going to notice that your camera won't always portray the white in an image how it's actually portrayed in real life. And so this is actually where the presets come in. Every camera should come with presets, or I believe every digital camera now comes with presets for different kinds of lighting. They have presets for tungsten, Kelvin, fluorescent, daylight, cloudy, shade, flash, and some other types of lighting. You can even go into the custom settings and change it if you really want to get the right lighting, I guess. So yeah, that's really all the manual settings you have to know to start shooting in manual mode. Just kind of the takeaways. You have shutter speed. You can have a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed. The faster your shutter speed, the less light you're going to let in and the less motion blur you're going to get. The slower the shutter speed, the more light you're going to get, but the more motion blur you're going to get. You have aperture, so the larger the aperture, the bigger the hole that's going to be in the iris of your camera, and you're going to let in more light. And the smaller the aperture, the less light you're going to let in. Then you have ISO, which is just the numerical value of your camera's light sensor that adjusts how sensitive it is to light. So the higher the ISO, the more sensitive your camera is going to be to light. The lower the ISO, the less sensitive your camera is going to be to light. And ISO is really the last thing you should be changing to get the correct brightness for your photos. And lastly, you have white balance, which if your photos are looking a little odd, either the color temperature is off or you're getting odd hues of greens or whatever, look into your color temperature and see what kind of lighting you're in, and see if your camera has a preset that matches the lighting that you're in. And so that'll automatically adjust to make the whites in real life look like the whites in the photo, or vice versa. I don't know. But second time felt right. It felt okay. I don't know. But hopefully you guys learned a little bit from this. Really just a crash course into the manual settings of any camera, and you can find in-depth stuff into pretty much all this stuff, especially aperture. I mean, lenses, they have diagrams of the mirrors and the light, and it's just crazy how in-depth stuff gets. I don't understand it, really. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. Like and subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, put them down below. Check out my Instagram, that's really popping off. I think I'm going to do a video about the grid that I fixed on my feed. It's all kind of uniform. It's getting better. But yeah, follow me on Instagram, and if you have any inquiries, check out my website down below. Bye.